welcome everyone to another episode of Talk IES, where this time we're speaking with Patrick Hurworth, Head of School at the International School of Beijing, about leadership solutions during the pandemic. Hi Patrick, how are you?
I'm very well, Richard. Thank you. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. I presume you're speaking to us from Beijing today?
I am. I'm on campus. We're 2 weeks away from the start of school, theoretically, if everything goes according to plan. A very busy place, lots of construction and renovation. And we're working with a team of teaching assistants that we've hired for the new school year, getting them ready.
Good. So thank you for giving up some of your valuable time to speak with us. Can you tell us how have things been there in Beijing, specifically during the pandemic?
Yeah, it's actually been one of the calmer places, I think, around the world. They did such a fantastic job of keeping COVID under control from the get-go. Obviously, the outbreak further south, to begin with, they took obviously very strident measures to make sure that COVID-19 was looked after. And we've been moving around the cabin freely since February, really, no real strictures. Obviously, we've got the situation of about 70% of our students being in China and only 30% of our teachers being in China. So like many of the schools in Beijing and China in general and other countries as well, we've got that imbalance and that logistical headache we're facing of trying to get our teachers back and trying to start the school year in as positive way as we possibly can. But it's to be in Beijing at the moment and consider that COVID-19 is done and dusted, which of course, clearly it's not, but they've done a good job of controlling it.
Yeah. Before we get into the questions, Patrick, can you tell our audience a little bit about yourself and some of the work you've done with schools and international schools in the world?
Yeah, so this is my, I think it's my fourth international school now, Richard. I joined the International School of Geneva in 1996, not 1896. I know that you were probably about to say that. And then spent 12 years in Atlanta International School in Atlanta, Georgia, where I was the secondary school principal, and then jumped over to Hong Kong 2014, where I was the high school principal at HKIS for 3 years. And I've been the head of school at IS Beijing now this is the end of my third year, beginning of my fourth year. So yeah, I was head of school and loved it, loved every minute of it. Originally from the UK, but it's been 20-something years since I've lived there.
Yeah. I know about that. So if you could hop in your time machine and go back to the beginning of the pandemic, what would you have done differently at ISB, knowing what you know now?
Yeah, well, since you sent me those questions, Richard, that's what I've been pondering a great deal, because I think, like many of us, we would have done a lot of things differently. But if I was to distill it down into one key point, I think I would have taken time to have tried to illustrate to our community that this might go on and it might be a longer term challenge. Not to be pessimistic, because obviously, being optimistic and having some sort of spring in your step about what tomorrow might look like is a crucial part of leadership, I think, during a time of crisis. But I bought in, I think, too readily to the false optimism that this might be a 2-week or a 3-week thing. So when we first went into lockdown and school closure, it was the Chinese New Year break, Richard, and we were all over the world, and we got a message from the authorities here in Beijing that we would be shut until February the 17th. And so I think just because it was new and we were all panicked, we latched onto that day with far too much confidence. And so our initial communication was much more about, get ready, it's happening, it's February the 17th, rather than trying to paint a picture of, well, you know what, folks, let's keep measured in our response, because this could go for a series of months. And I think that I didn't do the job I should have done, really, in saying to the leadership team, at least, and possibly the board as well, that we need to take care of tomorrow. We need to take care of the online learning program. We need to take care of our people, students, parents, and teammates here at ISB. But we didn't really do much scenario planning at that stage around June or September. And that continues to a certain extent. And I think part of what we're trying to do is, like I said, stay optimistic. But I would do that again, I think. You've asked me for one point, but I'll give you another if that's okay.
Sure.
I'm not sure I did a great job of demonstrating how uncomfortable it was for me. And not to talk about me too much as a leader, but acknowledging how much pain there was at that time, and frankly grief at the loss of the known and the certainty, I didn't share that too sufficiently at that time. And there was a fantastic article that came out from the Harvard Business Review about grief, and that came out quite soon through the pandemic, probably as early as February. And I think, when I read that to myself, I probably should have articulated something along those lines sooner, just so that everybody in the community who was feeling that way, could have a point of reference from within the community.
Yeah, I mean, what do you believe now was your one defining leadership message to your ISB faculty, to your staff during COVID-19?
Well, it was that sense of, we will get through this, and everyone does it in their own style. But we were consistent about that. We were consistent about the fact that this was, the worst of it. And it's still complicated, don't get me wrong, with teachers outside of the country and families outside of the country still, it's still complicated. And we're about to start on campus on September the 1st, Richard, with another reinvention school. But the worst of it was the immediacy of the turnaround back in January, back in early February, in fact. But even then, we were pretty good at saying, we will get through this. We don't know exactly what it's going to feel like, but we will get through it. And again, that sounds, a pretty straightforward concept, but we did it consistently. We did it in our written word to the parents. That was the message to the board the whole time, and to our teammates here as well, as whatever you're feeling right now, we'll come through it, and we will.
And obviously difficult communicating with staff, with some of them being in city and obviously some of them being, thousands of miles away, right?
Mm. Yeah. Well, I think what we did a decent job of is making ourselves accessible. The team, making ourselves accessible at different hours, on different scales, micro meetings, whole employee meetings as well through Zoom, where often it was much more of a fireside moment rather than an agenda meeting, just to check in, just to share some of the updates, also to quash some of the rumors. And so it was difficult. At the same time, it was a very positive aspect of our culture, I think, Richard, that developed at that time, as there was much more informal communication. Many more occasions when someone like myself or other members of the leadership team just checked in, acknowledged what we didn't know. And in fact, it was also a very good way of us collecting data, because so many of our teachers, so many of our employees are, better informed on some things than us, because they've been in China for a long time and they're in the different WeChat groups. So we would use that to harvest information as well. And we continued those meetings. In fact, we've gone through the summer running those meetings just to keep people together, just to give people a sense of togetherness at a time when that's still quite elusive.
I mean, how different will your school in Beijing be this new academic year? So obviously this is the first semester of a brand new academic year, and you're being through the walls, let's we say, for one semester, but just how different will it be?
Yeah, well, so physically it's going to be very different. I don't know, that's not quite the thrust of your question, but we've had 4 major construction projects which have just finished, and some renovations as well. So that's actually an important aspect of it, because it will give people a great deal of optimism again. Looking forward to coming back, being here, because these have been projects that have been in the works for a couple of years. But then you get into, again, the more micro bits and pieces of social distancing and masks and temperature checks around the clock. A cafeteria where there'll be 2 students rather than 8. And we'll get used to that, and we'll recreate, I think, the warmth of the school and the warmth of and the learning will look different to begin with, certainly with the teachers outside of the country still. There'll be a lot of virtual teaching still, online teaching, but students on campus being supervised by those teachers who are here, and some of the teaching assistants that we've hired as well. There will be less collaboration, at least physical collaboration amongst students because of the distancing, and that'll be hard to see or not see. But I think one of the key differences is that even though one of our initiatives at the school was to really reinforce our social emotional learning at ISB, that's brought it right up to the forefront now, an absolute urgency to make sure that when the students come back on campus, it's not a zero-sum game. We don't have to wait for the academics, but we mustn't wait on the social emotional support of the students, because there's no accounting yet to the degree of trauma they've gone through. Sure. If we're feeling loss and a degree of grief as to the way in which the world has changed, you better believe they have too. Not least those students who are joining the school, and they may have known for a year that they were coming to ISB, and it's going to be a very different ISB than the one they saw on the website. So we have to make sure we take stock of their needs, obviously, anyway, but certainly there's a real strong recommitment to making sure that our SEL programming is solid from day one.
Saying what you were saying at the beginning about, thinking about how long this is going to go on for, is the message there with everybody that, we're in this at least for another year, and that for this full academic year, this is how the routine will be?
Yeah, you probably read that McKinsey report that came out, I don't know, March sometime, about how you lead through this period. And one of the aspects of that was making sure that you express gratitude and celebrate the small wins. And we're just doing the latter at the moment, which is the small wins of some teachers coming back, and some teachers going through the quarantine, and some families coming back and going through the quarantine. So to answer your question, we're not speaking yet in terms of a definitive end and a return to what we knew before, because we have no guarantee that that's going to happen. Right. What we're thinking and speaking in terms of, Richard, is much more a real sense of when everyone will be back. And then when everyone will be back, we can start to think about really reimagining school. We've done it twice, and I know many schools have, but there'll be a third iteration, and that's when all the students are on campus and all the adults are on campus. And then how do we make the most of these wonderful kids, these wonderful teachers, and these wonderful facilities, bearing in mind the constraints we have to offer a high quality education, which is what we've always done. So we're not thinking about it this time next year. We're really looking at sort of more of a November period when we'll start to have an understanding of what's next.
It's almost the mental, the school here in Chiang Mai, it's the mental preparation for the students that, this is not a blip and something we're going to be doing for a week or two. It's getting them into a sort of a mental preparation. But I think it's so important what you're saying, that schools address the social and mental well-being of their students, and not just about the maths tests and science tests and all of that stuff.
Yeah, and taking care of the adults as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Because we've all been through a lot, not least our parents here. One of the big challenges I think we do face in China, again, is because COVID's been under control for so long, there is a sort of impatience that, can you stop talking about COVID, please, because that's someone else's problem. Well, we're an international community, so it's our problem, and it will impact us as long as we remain an international school. It'll impact us for as long as COVID is doing its thing.
Well, I wish you all the best, and I hope we can expedite getting your families and your teachers back to ISB.
Thank you very much.
Very soon, and thanks for all your words of wisdom. It's been great to speak with you today.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, and hope to see you face to face in the not too distant future, maybe April for EARCOS.
Not least because you owe me a coffee.
Is that all I owe you? Just one coffee?
There's plenty more than that, but we'll start with that.
Very good, Patrick. Great to see you. You take care.
Thanks so much. All the best.
Bye for now.
Bye.